Hey y'all, Gary here with Tennessee Stands. All right, so previously, actually yesterday, I streamed a video on HB1944, which is the bill that so many of us have heard about by now on the news, in every publication, on the radio, everywhere, about removing obscene materials and pornography from our schools, from our public libraries. And John Rich has testified on this bill, Victoria Jackson from Saturday Night Live. I mean, tons of really great testimony from really influential people, experts, parents, and we've talked about it a lot. We support this bill. But yesterday, when I streamed a video, and I felt like I always want to make sure I'm 100% confident and right on what I'm telling you. And there were a couple of nuances in there that I felt like I missed. So I deleted that video in case you wondered what happened. And I'm taking another stab at it because I feel like I've got a better grasp on this bill. And I want to say this. I support this bill. Tennessee Stands supports this bill, and we've supported it from the moment it was filed. It's on our Take Action page at TennesseeStands.org, and it's one of the bills that we've asked you to take action on. Email your legislators, call the members of the committee, and you've done that. You've done that brilliantly, and people have shown up in support of this bill. But here's the problem that I want to walk you through, and I want to make sure that you're all aware of where the bill currently sits in its amended form and what it does. So let's go look at the original bill. So you'll notice the original bill was super simple, just 2 sections, which is one of the reasons we supported it, because simple, uncomplicated bills are always better. And this bill did one thing, really. Kind of 2, but really 1. It put a firm duty on the school, on school administrators, and on school employees to make sure that obscene materials or materials harmful to minors were not available to students in our schools. And I want you to, when you look at the highlighted section here, I want you to really pay attention to the underlined word must, because that word is critically important. Must. All right? So again, the critical factor to acknowledge is that the duty, the burden, was on the schools to make sure that no one in the school is providing obscene material. And so let's go back, look at the bill. And I want you to notice section 1, because what it did was this was not and should not be an education bill. This is not an education bill. This has nothing to do with the administration of our public schools. This has everything to do with the criminal act of providing pornography or obscene materials to minors, regardless of whether or not it happens in some other public place or within our schools. Current law, in current Tennessee law, if you provide obscene materials, and it doesn't have to it goes straight to the court. There's not a board, there's not a school, there's not somewhere that parents have to go complain to. If you're busted providing obscene materials to minors, materials that the community considers harmful to minors, let me take you to this criminal justice code in Title 39. You are committing, on the first offense, a Class A misdemeanor, all right? Which means up to a $2,500 fine and up to a year in prison. If you commit a subsequent violation, all right, you are now committing a Class E felony. You're going to prison. So the original version of this bill basically did what the law already does. So the law today already protects minors from adults who give them harmful materials, obscene materials. It does that right now. All the bill did, the original version of the bill, was bring that into the school system. Obscene materials are not critical thinking educational materials. They're harmful to minors. If you provide them in our schools, you're going to jail. Period. We support that. The reason I'm making this video is because I think that most of us feel that this is what the bill still does, all right? That the bill we've been talking about will remove harmful material from our schools and penalize those who bring it into the school system. It doesn't. Not exactly. Let's go take a look at the newly amended bill. All right, so the first thing I want you to notice is the change in Section 2. We already saw this section. In LEA or public school, including a public charter school, must not allow wait. Oh, it doesn't say must anymore. Do you see the underlined word? They changed one. They didn't change anything else in Section 2 but one word. They changed the word from must to shall. So now the school district doesn't have a burden or a duty where they must not allow obscene materials. It says shall. Now you might be thinking must, shall, same thing. Let's go take a look at this. So I initially kind of thought like you think. I used to think, words mean the same thing. We know what they're saying. A judge would know what we mean, by must, shall. Well, I found this resource, plainlanguage.gov. Now, you can go Google this issue, the legal use of shall and must, and, there's lots of resources, but I thought this one just made it real plain. All right, so real simply, this legal resource actually says, don't use shall, use must. Use must to impose requirements. Shall is ambiguous and rarely occurs in everyday conversation. Makes sense, right? When do you and I tell each other, you shall do this? No, it says you must. You have to, all right? The legal community is moving to a strong preference for must as the clearest way to express a requirement or obligation. Now, let's look at the first two reasons why you should not use the word shall in legal language. First, lawyers regularly misuse it to mean something other than, quote unquote, has a duty to. It has become so corrupted by misuse that it has no firm meaning. Secondly, and related to the first point, it breeds litigation. In other words, when you use the word shall in your bill, you're begging for it to go to court and be litigated by a judge. This resource says that there are 76 pages in a legal resource called Words and Phrases that summarize hundreds of cases interpreting the word shall. So I'm just putting this out there, all right? The amended version of the bill, when it came back from the legal department, the original bill used the word must. In other words, to imply the school has an absolute duty to remove these materials from school. When the amended version of the bill came back from legal, all they did was change the word must to shall. Now, you need to ask yourself as a Tennessean, why would they do that? Why would they spend the intentional time it took? Why would they be so intentional about changing the one word from must to shall? Okay, so point number one, we just made the school's duty to remove harmful materials in schools just a little bit more ambiguous, and possibly now created a situation where a judge in a court can say, they didn't really have a firm duty to do this. All right, let's move on. The biggest issue with the newly amended bill, as you see now, is a new section, Section 3, which I want to make clear, was not in the original bill, changes the bill significantly, and was not the bill that we supported when we asked you to take action on this bill. Section 3 does something really critical to this bill. This bill is no longer about criminal justice. This bill now is an education bill. It brings the school boards into play. It brings a process that needs to be instigated by the superintendent. It now brings in the commissioner of education. It does all sorts of things that are brand new in the bill that now make it an educational procedure, which is what we didn't want, right? We were trying to remove any ambiguity that somehow our education, our public education facilities can teach kids obscenities. Okay, we simply wanted to make this a criminal act. All right, so let's take a look at what the bill does. Here, the first thing you need to know is that it only puts a duty on the school board to adopt a policy. All right, a policy by which now a parent can bring an issue up to your school superintendent, not your school board. They have to start with your school superintendent, whoever that is in your particular school district. And I want you to pay attention to the highlighted area. If the parent or legal guardian is aware of material that is obscene. So let's just digest that for a minute. The school does not have a direct burden at this point to make sure that obscene materials are not in your school system. They only now have a duty to put a process in place by which a parent, once they become aware that obscene material exists, can now bring it to the director of schools, the school superintendent, and now that material has to be brought before a school board, which we'll get to in a minute, and determine whether or not it's obscene. Now, let me ask you this question. How does a parent become aware that obscene material exists in the school system? How do you think that would happen? Well, the primary way I think that a parent would determine or become aware that there's obscene material is that the child brings it home. Either the child goes home and talks about the material to the parent, and the parent goes, "What are you talking about? This is at school," or the child checks out material from the library and brings it home and either shows it to the parent or the parent finds it in their backpack, per se. But the point I'm trying to make is that I would think, correct me if I'm wrong, the main way a parent would become aware that there's obscene material in the school is by first the child having been exposed to the material. Are you following me? The original intent of the bill was that our children are not being exposed to pornography and obscene materials. Okay. We changed that and now put a policy in place where the child has to first be exposed to the material, make the parent aware, and now go before the superintendent and then the school board. Do you see what I'm saying? All right. Before we get to the school board piece, now let's go look down at the enforcement part. 1 year ago, in last session, whenever we passed and again, we congratulated the governor. He made his rounds on news, all over the country. Tennessee passes an anti-CRT bill. We did it. Tennessee bans critical race theory. I came out immediately and kind of poo-pooed the bill, which I got a lot of flack. I had so many calls and emails from local activists who just, who worked so hard on the bill and thought I was terrible for speaking against their bill. The reason I spoke against the bill was because the only enforcement in the bill was directly on the shoulders of the Commissioner of Education in Tennessee, Penny Schwinn. All right. And she has the sole determination of figuring out whether or not a school district is teaching CRT. And I said, why would we do that? It's the fox guarding the hen house. This woman came from UC Berkeley. She instituted the Whole Child Initiative in Tennessee. She's all about social emotional learning. Guess what social emotional learning is and leads to? Diversity, equity, inclusion. Guess what that is? It's CRT. Why do we have Penny Schwinn determining whether or not a school system is teaching CRT? And by the way, The school system only gets penalized financially if Penny Schwinn says so. So I made us think about that. Now I want to ask you, was I wrong? That bill passed a year ago. To all of you parents who are dealing with diversity, equity, inclusion training in your schools and in your classrooms, and your teachers are going through this training still today, and you have several counties that are using a curriculum called Wit and Wisdom that is full of CRT. Has anything changed in the last year? I'm waiting. Are we done with CRT in Tennessee? Is it over? Has anything changed in a year? No. Why? Because we passed a bill that did nothing, and we patted ourselves on the back for it. And we ought not do that. All right, so let's look at this bill. Let's say hypothetically, a school district in Tennessee ignores this law and chooses not to even implement a policy by which a parent brings an accusation regarding a book that they consider is obscene. If the school refuses to put that policy in place per the law, look at the enforcement. The commissioner, which is the Commissioner of Education, may withhold state funds. So, I mean, I don't know. What kind of day is Penny having? How does Penny feel today? Is she in a good mood? Or is she in a mood where she just wants to punish somebody? Or is she just like, I love CRT? I don't know. How is Penny feeling today? Because the only way that this school gets penalized for not having the policy in the first place is if Penny feels like penalizing them. She may or she may not. And if she feels like penalizing them, it's in an amount per their budget determined by Penny. So maybe she really wants to slap them on the wrist and she, pulls $1,000 out of their annual budget, really sticking it to them. Look, I'm just telling you, having something like this in a bill where a school, what you're saying is a school has to put the policy in place, but their only punishment if they don't is whether or not Penny Schwinn decides that it's an issue, and she's going to decide whether or not she pulls their funds. This is CRT bill all over again. This is version 2. All right, so that's problem number 1. Bear with me, all right, because we're getting somewhere. Now, let's just say the school actually puts a policy in place. And let's just say a parent goes to the director of schools and there's an issue. They pull the book off the shelf and now there's a school board meeting. All right? So what does it say? The parent or legal guardian has to be aware. Let's keep going. The director of schools now has to remove the book for a period of no less than 30 days. Within that 30-day period, the local school board now has to determine whether or not the material is obscene. And if the material is obscene, the school now has to permanently remove the material from access to students. All right, but what do you think that school board meeting looks like? Let me show you. Let's get a picture of what we're setting up here. I'm a dad. My kid brings home a book I don't think should be in the library. I go to Jason Golden here in Williamson County, and I say, hey, bro, bad book. He takes it off the shelf. Now we have a school board meeting. Who shows up? What does this look? You remember when we were called domestic terrorists, right? Because we're trying to get school boards to do the right thing. So a whole bunch of parents like me and like you show up yelling at school board members, this is not right. Take this out of our schools. Why do we have pornography in our schools? Why are we teaching students, that they should go have sex with other boys? Like, why do we have books like this in our schools? So we show up, we say our piece. The other side, the leftist progressive crazies that believe this is all about free speech and critical thinking, and they show up and they say their piece, and then we all go in the parking lot and we punch each other in the face or whatever, because we're domestic terrorists. All right, and we live to stir chaos. This is what this bill does. This is what these school board meetings are going to look like. Parents who disagree on some really core issues that really shouldn't be confusing to anyone. And now we're having school board meetings that determine whether or not these books come off the shelf. This is getting long. Let me close. Let's go back to the criminal justice piece. What point does somebody go to jail? If the school board determines that this book needs to come off the shelf, and it does, and then at some later point, a librarian, a teacher, some third party is found to have that material on campus now, okay? Now that's where the criminal justice piece kicks in. Now that person is facing potentially a Class A misdemeanor or a Class C felony. But just for that one piece of material. So you see what happens here? So is anyone penalized? What about the other pornographic material that hasn't been adjudicated by the school board yet? What about the new material that has subsequently been brought into the school that hasn't been adjudicated by the school board yet? Do you see where I'm going? All of that stuff is not obscene material, and there's no criminal penalty for any of it. What am I saying? What I'm saying is the way this bill is structured, it puts a burden first on the child to be exposed to obscene material. The parent has to then bring it to the superintendent. Then there's a school board meeting over a singular item. And once that singular item has been adjudicated as obscene in our community, then and only then do now criminal penalties exist if someone brings. But there could be 50, there could be 100 of these books, and new material can be brought in. The way this law is written, this is a never-ending saga of school board meetings trying to get material out of our schools, and at the end of the day, people are held accountable. Maybe not, because must, shall, maybe they have a policy, maybe they don't. Penny Schwinn gets to determine. Look, this bill's a mess. It's a mess. At the end of the day, I'm not really sure it does a whole bunch of anything. And what needs to happen is men and women need to learn to stick to their guns. And by God, when it comes to our children, protect our children. This entire amendment should be thrown in the trash can. And we should go back to the original bill that we all supported that says quite simply, if you possess obscene materials outside the school, you're going to jail. If you provide obscene materials to minors outside of the school, you're going to jail. That's law today. Let me be clear. If you're an adult and you provide obscene materials to a child in your home, even in the public, if you're harming children with obscenity, you go to jail. All the bill did was say if you do it in schools, you go to jail. It doesn't matter if you do it outside the school or inside the school. You're harming minors, you're going to jail. We need to go back to that, because all of the confusing nonsense that we've now put in this bill, it does almost nothing. Every single person that has been fighting for this bill needs to understand everything I just showed you, because what we started out with is not where we are today. It's not a criminal justice matter anymore. We've now wrapped this a whole bunch of educational procedure minutia around something that was very simple in an effort by those who disagree with you and I in protecting our kids to create a bill that does